Right. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, JP? You well?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah. Struggling a bit with the usual pandemic stuff and the rubbish British weather, but apart from that, in good spirits. And talking of well, not quite spirits, but I've got my red wine here. So have you got a drink there with you, Steve? Oh, cheers.
Going,
We'll have to yeah,
going with
cheers.
a beer. Going with a beer. It's nice and warm here in South Africa, so we need to cool
Is
down a
that
little bit.
is that Stella you've got there? Is it?
Yeah, it is.
Ah, yeah. That was my drink as a student.
Oh, that was always a premium drink here in South Africa. I couldn't afford it as a student.
Actually, yeah, I think it's gone up market since I was a student.
Yeah, like Amstel and Heineken.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, listen,
true.
as the way things are going in South Africa, I'm just glad that I can get a beer at this stage of the game.
Oh yeah, because didn't they ban alcohol sales completely with you at some
Yeah,
point?
they did during the main pandemic, well, the first lockdown they did, and now I actually haven't kept track of what's going on with the lockdown. I stay inside basically, just
Yeah,
to avoid
to
any
your own lockdown.
curfews,
Yeah.
arrests, army people taking me out. I just stay inside and don't ask questions.
So did you get food and drink delivered then?
Well, we can go to the shops, which is fine,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, there are listen, a lot of restaurants have taken that up. A lot of some good
Hmm.
entrepreneurial stuff going on, which is pretty cool.
Same here. Same
Yeah,
here.
yeah. New time for businesses. Anyway, so jumping into the discussion of the day. Hey, so WhatsApp and Facebook, man, what an interesting situation. And yet,
Yeah.
also, I feel a little bit like this is just kind of business as usual. Being online these days is privacy and people stealing your data. Hey,
Yeah. I think there's quite a lot of aspects to this story,
yeah,
really. As we should just sort of outline the situation.
yeah,
So feel free to chip in, but basically it's around new privacy policy, isn't it, on
yeah,
WhatsApp? And
yeah.
that's been popping up on people's phones when they go in and launch WhatsApp and saying basically you've got to agree to these new T's and C's, and if you don't, you won't be able to use WhatsApp.
Right.
So what happened is that there's quite a lot of an outcry, I think, just because of the fact people were kind of like being forced into something. Uh, Big issue about sort of understanding of what the actual new privacy policy means, which we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a minute. Quite a lot, I think, probably poor communication from Facebook that this was going to happen, and what it actually did mean, which led to the subsequent confusion. And the latest is that it was going to happen next month, but the latest is that it's being pushed back to May the 15th from memory, but that doesn't really matter. It's sometime in May, I think, isn't it? So,
Yeah. So yeah, and I think you hit on something very interesting there with saying about Facebook pure communication, because in a way, based on what I read and what I was looking through, is it very much did come down to that. They just really nosed up the well, they say they screwed up the communication. I think it is also quite a problem what they're suggesting in terms of allowing a bunch of data to swap between two apps that you shouldn't necessarily have anything to do with each other. But I think it's also important to mention and make people aware of the fact that they've made it clear as well that it's not your messages necessarily that are going to be shared. It's not the content of your messages, but it's more
exactly.
the metadata, names, dates, times, and things like that. So it's data surrounding the message you share. That being said, is that any better? I don't know if it is. It's still data that's private data and shouldn't be necessarily be shared. But they've tried to clarify that it's also it's not a free and clear just sharing of data straight across.
Yeah, I think that was the big problem initially because everybody and a lot of people I think are still under the misapprehension that Facebook can literally read your messages,
Yeah,
whereas they are fully end-to-end encrypted.
yeah,
I think the other thing is that there's this split between the personal side and the business side. And in other discussions we've had, we've talked about WhatsApp business a fair bit, which I'm a big sort of fan of.
yeah,
And they are saying that, I mean, there's two really big caveats to this. Another thing that perhaps they should have communicated better, but they seem to be on the offensive now, is that you're right about the metadata and stuff, but it's only in connection with businesses.
Business
So it's
accounts.
only when you communicate with a business,
Yeah.
and as they point out, that's not compulsory. You know, you might want to use WhatsApp just for your mates and your family and your
Yeah.
clubs and your groups and that sort of thing. So to that extent, the new privacy policy doesn't apply at all unless you decide to communicate with a business. And of course, from the business side of it, then I think WhatsApp for Business is a really good thing, and perhaps we'll talk a bit more about that in more detail in a minute or another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then the other caveat is that for us over here in the UK and the EU, there's no change at all. There's literally no change at all because of GDPR. They aren't going to be sharing any data even on the business side. So you can pretty much sort of click that, accept the conditions if you're in UK and EU, because it's not really going to make an awful lot of difference.
Yeah.
It's just updating the T's and C's without anything too substantial in there.
Yeah, cool. So look, I think, from
Yeah.
an agency perspective, I think the message to you as agency owners and to your clients is, especially obviously in the UK, South Africa's also got a similar POPI Act, which is Protection of Personal Information. Is, firstly, there's not much to worry about, obviously, if you're in those two countries, but obviously if you've got clients obviously all over the world, there are things to worry about. It is a sharing of data, and there is, I think what's more, from a bigger picture, what's more significant is how big a company like Facebook can screw something up like what they did. That's the first.
Yes, I think you've hit on something really important there.
Yeah.
It's a question of trust, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, and we'll actually come to that because I've got a bit to say about that as well. But I think the other thing to make note and make sure that you're aware of is that there is nothing to worry about immediately. Obviously, the backlash that they had from this has been so bad, and not only has WhatsApp seen an absolute hemorrhage of users leaving the platform because of this. And I can imagine if you're in the UK, or sorry, in the US or Canada or Europe, other parts of Europe, there's a little bit to fear. So I can understand why people are leaving there. But you do have a bunch of time. I think it was May 15th. You've got a bunch of time. The way they put it in typical PR speech, I think they said something about you can review. We'll give you time to review this policy change at your own pace or whatever it is, which is fine, which is good. I mean, I wish that everybody, everybody who updated their terms and services would do the same. It's kind of like, here's 500 pages, read them, or you can't use our app kind of thing.
Yeah, click now.
Yeah. It always takes me back to that South Park episode where the one character accepts the Apple terms and conditions, and ends up basically setting himself to Apple permanently because he didn't read the terms and conditions. And everyone gives him a hard time for not reading the terms and conditions. But who's actually ever read terms and conditions? I mean, I don't know many people who have. But yeah, I think that's obviously the big one is, it's just, just so you guys know out there that there is nothing too immediately to worry about, but there are obviously digital agencies dealing with that immediate backlash from clients going, what the hell do we do? We've invested a lot of time and effort in WhatsApp or Facebook. Like you say, business on WhatsApp is starting to kick off and really pick up, and people are using it for business quite a bit. So what do we do, and what are our options, which I think is quite another interesting thing, which we discussed briefly before, about what do people actually what are their options if it's not WhatsApp? What can you do? And obviously we've all been online in the last week, so we all know everyone's singing about Signal and in particular Telegram. Those are the two big ones that have absolutely exploded out of this. I know that Signal actually was down at one stage because of the influx of traffic. They had to take on new servers and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and your word hemorrhaging was appropriate, because so much so that the alternative literally collapsed, as you say, under the volume of new users.
Yeah, and it makes me think there was another situation like of that where Zoom during the pandemic. During the pandemic, as we sit here in the middle of it. But in the early days of the pandemic, Zoom completely crashed. There was
like you, I'm wishing the pandemic over, Steve.
Sorry, I'm thinking into the future. But Zoom completely crippled underneath those first initial days, because well done to them for getting it right and putting it out, because they did manage to, and they've absolutely skyrocketed since then. And Skype. Let's not get into that. But I think the message here is that there are alternatives, and I think that's what we're seeing as a in the world of social and digital at the moment in general. We're starting to see alternatives come about. And a lot of it's got to do with what's going on in the world politically. Some of it's got to do with bad decisions by companies like Facebook who make these mistakes. But, we are starting to see real viable alternatives to the mainstream. For years, for 10 years or so, we've had Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the mainstream main platforms that we communicate on. But I think people are starting to realize that there are alternatives out there where you don't have to necessarily put up with this bullshit of, oh, my data's just going to, I just have to, the price I pay for being part of this platform is lack of privacy, or the price I pay is, being force-fed ads and people, wondering, are they listening to my conversations? So that's quite an interesting one, the two main alternatives, Signal and Telegram. Have you had much experience with those?
I've not. I did dabble with Telegram a while back, and it seemed pretty similar to WhatsApp with the groups and that kind of thing. But I'm a very, very regular WhatsApp user, both on the personal side for like a running group and friends messages, and increasingly so on the business side. It's worth pointing out that the business side is actually a separate app if anyone wants to look into that. And you can set up a shop and you can communicate with your customers, sell products, send out newsletters in the style of an email. So it's a pretty cool app. I'll just leave that there. But if anybody wants to know any more, do get in touch on that. So I think, but batting it back to you with the move to Signal and Telegram, would you actually, two questions really, are you recommending that, or are you just kind of like pointing out that that's an option for people? And finally, the big one of all, can we trust Facebook?
No, well, to answer to your last question is no. You definitely can't trust Facebook or any of or anybody we give our data to. Unfortunately, I think that that really is as I said, the price that you pay to be part of these platforms and to facilitate. And I always say to people, just generally speaking about social, is if you don't want it out there, don't put it out there, because it will get out there. If you're not comfortable with having something on your Facebook platform in public, don't put it on there. Don't use it as a storage facility where you're going to store pictures of your kids, but they're private. That stuff I just don't think is a good idea. So I always say to people, if you don't want it out there on social, don't put it out there on social. But unfortunately, I think that the reality is that we as digital marketers and digital agency owners we can't get away from using these platforms. Our clients want us on those platforms. They want to be on those platforms, and we need to be part of it in order to be to provide them with a good service. I think that if you're doing general business and you're using it in a responsible way when it comes to privacy, I think you're fine. To answer the question about Telegram and Signal and using those, and do I suggest people go into those? The reality is, ironically, Telegram is something I've been on for many years.
Okay. Is it a popular one in South Africa?
It's not tremendously popular in South Africa. It's in fact I wouldn't say it's popular at all, but I signed up to it many years ago for I can't even remember why I signed up to it. I think there were some friends who were using it as their platform, and I can't remember why, but I've been on it for years and we use that platform. We just always have. But it's a very niche group of friends. And so it's not popular in South Africa, but I think, and Signal as well, actually, to be honest with you, Signal only came across my radar when this whole thing went down. So I think that the good thing, obviously, about Signal, for those, obviously who want to know what are the two options. Telegram is great. Telegram is very, very big. But there's no end-to-end encryption on Telegram. So your messages are a lot less private. Um, it's also got a bit of a criminal background to it. So it's good and it's there and it's very similar to WhatsApp. Signal is the one that I think most people are flocking to. It's got the end-to-end encryption. And I think most importantly, why they're going to Signal is because it's open source. So it's a free, the code is free, the platform is free. Anybody can use it. Anybody can make improvements to it and can add to the community. And I think that's a big part, and nobody owns that data. At least that's what they say. The problem is, no
ads.
Say that again.
No ads on
not as far as I know. No, not on Signal. But the thing about what's always cool about open source is that it allows for these really smart IT nerds and geeks.
Yeah, to come up with cool features.
And the security, just from a security perspective, apparently from what I read, Signal is very, very heavy on security in terms of security personnel from all over the world regularly check it and see if there's ways to make improvements and things like that. And it was actually built, I think, originally for a security platform.
Well, I think we can actually bank on the security side of it, because Edward Snowden actually tweeted that he was alive because of Signal.
There you go.
And then the recommendation from Elon Musk as well. So,
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
And that apparently, that tweet alone skyrocketed their stock price, which is crazy. And also another thing, Signal was actually joined by one of the WhatsApp founders. When he left WhatsApp, he went to Signal and he started working with them. So he took it really to take it to the next level. The reality is those are your two options, Telegram and Signal. Those are the two main options. The reality is, and this is real life now, is people are only going to change if their contacts are on the platform. There's no point in being on Telegram or Signal if all your friends and
that's the big thing, isn't it? That's
right. And I think that's where one of the biggest challenges is for agency owners and their clients is the reality is you can move off to these other platforms. And like, for example, some of my groups made blanket decisions immediately, and knee-jerk, and they said, guys, we're shutting down this group, move to Telegram, let's go. But the reality is that if you don't find your contacts on the platform, you're going to be frustrated and you're not going to use the platform. It's going to take a lot of migration out of WhatsApp, which is a very popular platform, to move onto Telegram or to Signal before it becomes an environment where you feel comfortable. Like, I couldn't open Signal now and start rebuilding all the groups that I've got, or all the connections I've got. If I knew, for example, 100% that Facebook was going to steal my data and look at my messages and all that, I'd make the effort. But the reality is most people are lazy, and most people aren't really communicating stuff that's illegal or too sensitive. So they'll probably stay on the platform that they're on, which I think is the only thing going for WhatsApp at the moment. But who knows? I think the lessons learned, one of the other things I think which is important to note is, there is another alternative as well, which is Facebook Messenger. I don't know if you use that a lot, don't you?
Yeah, probably more than, or maybe an equal amount to WhatsApp, actually. And the thing with that, which is the other thing I noticed that Facebook are kind of working on in a clever way, as you say, because it's all about your contacts, is that because Messenger is very much integrated with Facebook, I tend to use it for communication with friends a lot. And like we haven't got a family group on WhatsApp, but we've got a family group on Messenger. So because everybody's on Facebook, so it's just kind of like easier. But I've noticed, interestingly, that recently, don't know how long it's been there, it might have been there a little while, but this sort of slow integration. So for example, on your Facebook profile, you can actually list not only your phone number, but guess what? Your WhatsApp number on there as well, which may or may not be different. So you can see what they're doing there, because yes, that's useful for people to know. But it's like you were saying, if that's going to encourage more people to message you from the Facebook platform onto WhatsApp, then all of a sudden you've got that Facebook friend connection thing going on, and it's going to be, when the time comes for you to make a decision about moving elsewhere to Signal or wherever, it's kind of another reason not to, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like quite a thing. And on the business side too, now for quite some time, on the Facebook business pages, you see everybody's got the ability once again to add their WhatsApp stuff on there, and you can even put the button that sits beneath the cover area. It can say WhatsApp there. So if you're on your phone, you can just quite easily WhatsApp a business by clicking that button. So yeah, they've been quite clever with the integration, and I think that's why the privacy policy, part of the reason it's come about, because there is synergy between the two platforms, and they are trying to make the most of that.
That's, as you say, that synergy between the platforms. But I know some of the stuff that I read about Facebook Messenger is not good stuff, in terms of security and in terms of...
the track, I mean, you can switch on, I think it's called secret conversations, so you can switch on encryption. And I think they are bringing that in by default, but at the moment it's not. So every single conversation you want to be encrypted, you do need to switch that on. Just give me 1 second. I'm listening, but I've just got to do something in the kitchen.
Go for it. So while you're away, one of the things that I wanted to also bring up was, kind of the experience that I had with Facebook, and what we kind of, as I say, that sort of price we pay for use of their platform is serving us ads. And I was quite frustrated the other day. I was on Facebook, and there was a pop-up that said something like, we want to better serve you ads and give you a better experience. So which of the answer this question for us? And I thought it was really just, it really summed it up, that we've kind of sold our souls in a way in order to use these platforms. We have signed up for ads. Obviously, some platforms allow for a purchase, like YouTube. You can buy premium and get an ad-free experience. But it really has become that message of us being, our data just being a commodity. Facebook doesn't trade in anything other than people's data and the ability to serve ads to people.
I get the sense, well, you said yourself that you don't trust Facebook, but do you think they would go as far as snooping into people's messages to serve better ads? I mean, they are very clear on the fact that it is totally encrypted, so even themselves can't access the messages. Or is it like I'm sure with many people, that sort of trust thing, that you just can't fully trust what they're actually saying?
Yeah, unfortunately, I kind of do fall on that side of, I don't trust what they're saying, and I wouldn't.
Well, it's understandable, because you've got Cambridge. There's so many examples of it, isn't there? You've got Cambridge Analytica, all the various
Slotow,
data breaches and the sort of rollbacks over the years, and even with WhatsApp, I think that could go to one. It could be the big reason why there was this sudden migration away, because of the trust, because of two things. Because they've said there aren't going to be any ads on WhatsApp. They said that initially, and then guess what? There's now going to be ads on WhatsApp. Probably only on the status, on the stories bit that nobody ever uses, at least initially. But it's kind of like initially. So how far are the ads going to go? And also, when they took, the big one is when they took, as a lot of journos have pointed out, when they took WhatsApp over, they said they weren't going to share data with Facebook. So even if they're now saying, oh, it's only on the business side, well, they kind of like rode back there. So I think what people are probably thinking is that, okay, so they're now telling us that it's only on the business side, but what's to say that they're not going to turn around next week and say, well, actually, we're also going to share data on the personal side?
Look, I wouldn't be so skeptical if we didn't know what we know already. And what I'm referring to in particular is the whole situation with Snowden and the whistleblowing on what he knew, or what he blew out on what the US government was spying on its own citizens, and that whole situation. When that came out and that was a reality, and I thought, shit, this whole, that was in the days when big data was becoming a thing. And when that came out, I wasn't surprised. I was obviously a bit surprised. I was like, wow, they're actually doing that. And the fact that was never dealt with from a, nobody really was put to trial, or there was no heads chopped off or anything like that. But also the fact that everybody kind of knew it was going on, and it just continued to go on. the reality, as I say, is the reality is what can we individuals do who are just sitting on the platform and worried about our data? We still use the platform and we still put ourselves out there, and that's a price that we pay. I think we have to be careful what we put out there. But I definitely wouldn't put it past them to be spying on us. If not, maybe spying is the wrong word, collecting data to give us a better experience by serving us better ads. Is that any better than listening to our information and going, hey, advertiser, you should speak to this guy. He was having a conversation with someone else the other day about gym equipment. He's a right for an advert.
Yeah, and the latter is they are definitely going to do the latter. I mean, that's what non-Europe and EU are basically signing up to for sure.
Yeah. So it's very scary, but I mean, I think it's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably it'd be interesting. I don't know whether that's the majority opinion. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I would tend to believe, at least, that with WhatsApp messages, Facebook can't see, and they can't monitor that in any shape or form in terms of words contained in the messages and that sort of thing. However, Snowden, you're on the same camp as him, and so he's not going to use WhatsApp in a million years, and he's no fool, is he? And he probably knows an awful lot more about these things than us.
Yeah.
So that does actually say quite a lot, I think.
Look, a lot of decisions to be made. The whole personally and in business,
reality versus trust thing is it's a big issue.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, I was just saying there's a lot of decisions to be made.
What was that, Steve? I didn't catch it.
Say again?
Yeah. I just say it's probably everybody's. It comes down to your personal view, but I would totally agree with you that the positive out of all of this is that at least there are other options now. Because if there's just one major player in the market, which there was when it was just WhatsApp, then there is an increased risk that some nefarious stuff is going to go on, or even failing that, you've used the term mistakes quite a lot, perhaps being generous with that term, but there is of course that, and I think mistakes are more likely to be made if there is a monopolistic position. So it is good people have got a choice and can go elsewhere if they want to, and it seems, well, doesn't seem, it is the case that an awful lot of people are making that choice.
Yeah. Listen, what can we do? We got to see how things unpack and how they play out. Well, before we end, just a quick congrats to Biden and Harris. I think officially, while we've been talking, the inauguration has happened, and I think Harris.
Yeah, I was watching it on CNN earlier. Yeah, the Lady Gaga singing the American national anthem was something else.
I didn't catch it. I'll go check it out. JP, thank you so much.
Probably on the headlines.
Yeah. Awesome.
What was that?
No, I just said thanks.
Was that some South African expression I wasn't familiar with? You're very welcome, mate.
Awesome, man. Always like and happy 2021. Looking forward to a good year, and we'll catch up again soon.
Look forward to it. Take care.
Be well.
Cheers, Steve. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Okay.